with your camera on if you're comfortable, or not if you prefer not to be seen on the interwebs.
Privacy is an illusion, but
Don't like to be perceived, we understand. And folks are still rolling in, so we'll give folks a couple minutes just to join here before we get going. Let's see. It's right at 6 o'clock, so we'll just give folks another minute. Again, thank you everyone. It has been for being here. It has been quite a week in North Carolina redistricting.
definitely. I mean, yeah, this past week has been something else.
I've got whiplash.
You should get that taken care of.
Yeah, I should. Thanks everyone for joining. Okay, I've got some folks coming in. Well, why don't we get started? If you'll keep an eye on that room, I think the first thing we're going to do is just kind of walk through the agenda for tonight. So we'll kind of slow walk it from the beginning so folks don't miss what I'm sure a lot of people are joining for, which is the updates. So thanks everyone for being here. My name is Bree Bro. I'm the digital organizer with All on the Line North Carolina. Do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself while you're?
Yeah, my name is Laika Shupek, and I am the North Carolina State Director for All on the Line.
And it is great to see so many folks here for our December statewide meeting. It's been, like we've said, it's been quite a week in North Carolina, and we've got some updates, and then we're going to spend some time. Well, let's move on to the slide where I talk about the agenda. So we'll do our normal kind of welcome and some introductions and housekeeping. We will then share the update from the week, which could take a year. Just kidding, it won't, but it's been a lot for the past week. And it was really fortuitous that this meeting was already scheduled for today. Since stuff has just been happening, right up until today, and will continue. We are going to then move into what we're calling a redistricting storytelling training. We'll kind of get into what that means, but we're going to be really digging into some of the maps and showing y'all how to do that. And we've got some tools to help you figure out the best way for you to talk about the maps and what they mean for you personally and for your community. And then we'll do an update, just a quick update on the summit that we've got coming up early next year that we're planning right now. We'd love to get some feedback. And then we will have some time for some open forum time for Q&A if folks want to either dig deeper into the maps or talk about whatever questions y'all have and some next steps. So let's keep going. Let's see. Are you in a place where you could launch the poll?
Yes, I can.
So we're going to try launching this little poll. We've done this before. If y'all have been with us before, we do this from time to time. We just kind of like to get a sense of where folks are joining from in the state. We're all about the maps. So you're looking at a map of North Carolina. These are not districts. These are just regions. This is actually, I think, the Department of Public Instruction map. But we just want to get a sense of what part of the state folks are joining from. So I think, did you already launch it? I don't see it.
Yeah, I did launch it. This is close to, I think, the Department of Public Instruction map. However, this is actually an original Laika Shupek invention.
Forgot about that.
So
yeah. So just if you would just fill out the poll so we can get a sense of where we've got folks joining from tonight. If you're in the mountains or the Piedmont, the Triangle, we've got on your screen, you see the sort of numeric, the numbers that correspond to different regions. So hopefully it makes sense for everyone. Does anyone not see it? I don't see it, so I'm just, are folks, can you see if the people are filling it out?
The poll, okay, look, it looks like we have some thumbs up, so I think.
Okay, great.
Well,
we know where I live, so.
93% of people have answered, so I think I might go ahead and end the poll. If that's okay with you, Bree.
That's okay with me.
Great. And I will share the results. All right, can people see that? So we have a good spread of people from the mountains, from the Triad, from the Triangle, people from Eastern North Carolina. We have one person from the Sandhills, which is my home region. And then a few people from Charlotte Metro, and then some people from outside of the state.
Wonderful. Well, welcome everyone. Thank you very much for being here. Just for anybody who maybe is new to the space, we are All on the Line, North Carolina. All on the Line is a 501c4 campaign to bring citizens across every issue together to work and to win on redistricting, to win fair maps in 2021 or maybe 2022. And so our mission is just to provide avenues for engagement, to raise awareness about, the harmful impacts of gerrymandering, and to encourage participation in activities that support our democratic ideals. And that's what we've been doing and will continue to do. And we really appreciate everyone being here and all that. So many folks on this call I see have been working really hard this year, and we appreciate all of you. We did do the fun poll. If you're at your computer and you're able, we'd love for you to introduce yourself in the chat so folks can get to know each other a little bit. There's too many people to go around and do live introductions, but we'd love it if you would put your name and your preferred pronouns in the chat, as well as where you're joining from, your location, where you live, whether it's inside North Carolina, what part of the state or county or city. Just want to reiterate for folks that we are live on Facebook, and the meeting is being recorded. And if at any point you have questions, you're welcome to put them in the chat, and we'll try to answer them. And we'll also have some time at the end for questions. Okay, so I guess I'm gonna maybe hand it over to Leica now. We are gonna now go into what I'm sure a lot of folks are really curious about, to share the litigation update on what's happening right now in the courts.
Thanks, Bree. So you want to go to the next? Okay, so this is a timeline I put together. Over the past couple of weeks, we have seen a lot of action on redistricting litigation in North Carolina. I will go through it sort of by event and tell you where we are and try to give some perspective on what we think is coming. So last Tuesday, we sort of saw our first hearing in sort of a gerrymandering case. SCSJ, Southern Coalition for Social Justice, had, in cooperation with the NAACP and some other plaintiffs, brought a case about the process. So in North Carolina, what Southern Coalition for Social Justice was saying is that we have sort of established law about how you're supposed to draw maps. And one of the things you were supposed to do is draw Voting Rights Act districts first before you draw any other districts. And that was not what was done during our process. Voting Rights Act districts were not really considered at all. And so they had brought sort of a claim against the process, sort of a procedural claim, saying you didn't follow sort of the legal process. And so that was their challenge. They asked the court for a preliminary injunction. This was in front of Wake County Superior Court Judge Shirley, and that preliminary injunction request was denied by Judge Shirley. Having sat in there for that hearing, basically it sounded like he felt that basically at this point the maps were passed, and why aren't you challenging the maps? Why are you challenging the process? This is kind of weird. So that's what happened there. We don't really know what's going to go on with that case from there. I believe that they did appeal that to the state Supreme Court, although I don't think that there has been any action there that I know of. But that case could be updated, it could change, something could come out of that case. But that's one case that's sitting out there at the moment. The cases that you may have been more likely to hear about are the cases with where the League of Conservation Voters is a plaintiff, and then there's also a case, Harper et al. Plaintiffs. And if you recall, in 2019, Harper versus Lewis was the congressional partisan gerrymandering case brought in 2019. So it's a very similar group of plaintiffs that's challenging congressional maps this year. And so those two cases were motions for preliminary injunction, which would mean sort of forestalling any candidate filing from taking place. Basically, in practice, forestalling these maps from being used in elections. They had requested that preliminary injunction. They did that in a hearing on Friday, this past Friday, before a panel of judges. So in North Carolina, any redistricting cases have to go before a special panel of 3 Superior Court judges chosen by the state Supreme Court Chief Justice. State Supreme Court Chief Justice is Justice Paul Newby right now, who replaced Sherry Beasley after she lost that election by about 401 votes. And so that panel was chosen by him. The preliminary injunction was requested from those judges on Friday. The request for preliminary injunction was denied on Friday for both of those groups of plaintiffs. They then appealed to the Court of Appeals, knowing that candidate filing was supposed to open on Monday, the 6th. So candidate filing was supposed to open this Monday.
I'm not showing any camera.
Sorry, I'm just gonna mute whoever that was. And candidate filing was supposed to open on Monday. We got on Monday, right after candidate filing opened, we got notice that the Court of Appeals had granted that request to, put a stay on filing, hold it up until these maps could really be evaluated in court. And so candidate filing stopped on Monday. And as you can see in this timeline, so that was December 6th. Then the defendants in that case appealed that stay to the full Court of Appeals. So basically, when that kind of preliminary injunction request initially came through, it goes to whatever judge's turn it basically is at the Court of Appeals to handle that. And then the defendants can appeal to the full Court of Appeals. So then the full Court of Appeals came back and denied the preliminary injunction. So then candidate filing was restarted again, and then restarted again on December 7th. And then on December 8th, which was yesterday, the state Supreme Court, once plaintiffs had appealed that again, asking for a preliminary injunction from the state Supreme Court. State Supreme Court came down with a pretty broad order ordering that candidate filing be stopped, that the primary be moved to May 17th of next year. So, as you probably know, somewhat recently, we've historically had primaries in May, and then in recent years, it's been moved to March. I think mostly because, we like being an earlier state, getting more attention during especially the presidential process. But now the court has decided to say, we want to see this case properly dealt with. And so we're moving the primaries back to May. And they've also said that they need to have a ruling from the trial court, which is that same 3-judge panel that was hearing the preliminary injunction originally last Friday, is going to be the trial court for this case. And so that trial court needs to have some kind of ruling on this case by January 11th. And so that is putting us in this very tight timeline. Courts don't necessarily usually do things very quickly, but we are going to have to go through some kind of trial process before that January 11th date. And then also, to give you a little bit more perspective, what we've been hearing from sort of a local election officials is, if you have if the primary is on May 17th, That means that by law, absentee ballots have to go out on, I think, April 5th. Takes a couple weeks for those ballots to even be printed after candidate filing closes. So April 5th, and then a couple weeks before that, that's going to be mid-March. And then, candidate filing is usually open for a couple of weeks. So given that, it would seem like you would have to have some kind of maps in place, through whatever court process goes on by the end of February, just to make that timeline as we see it now. Now, the courts, have all kinds of powers to change that up if they want to. If it doesn't seem to make sense, things could change. But in the current timeline that we understand it, that seems like the point at which we would have some kind of map resolved coming out of this court process. So I think that's everything. And I know that's super confusing. So if there are any quick.
There's a couple of questions in the chat that I think might make sense to go ahead and answer now if we can. The first one, I'll just go from the one that was just put in. Who are LCV and Harper? What's their backstory?
Okay, so this is there's sort of two kinds of plaintiffs that you see in these cases. There's organizational plaintiffs, and then there are individual plaintiffs. So LCV, League of Conservation Voters, that's an organizational plaintiff. So it's the organization saying that, like, as an organization, the work that we do, particularly about like getting voters to the polls and things like that, will suffer because of these maps. So they're making a claim on the behalf of it impeding their work to some degree as an organization. And then, so if you say Harper, I think is Rebecca Harper, that's an individual person. So she is a voter who is personally impacted by these maps. And so you'll see on these cases, there will often be organizational plaintiffs. So it'll be like the League of Conservation Voters, or if you look in 2019, the Common Cause of North Carolina is another organizational plaintiff. And then you'll see a lot of individual names, which are individual voters who are saying, we as individual voters are being impacted by these maps.
Awesome. Another question is, because of that timeline, what's to prevent the state assembly from resubmitting a similar set of maps again and just stubbornly running out the clock?
Well, I mean, one thing I will say is that there is sort of a requirement to give a certain degree of deference to the state legislature to sort of give them a crack at drawing maps. I think it's 2 weeks that the courts usually have to give them to draw maps. However, we did see in the past that, I think in one of the federal cases in the past, when the court was dissatisfied with some elements of the map and felt that they didn't adequately fix the problems, that court did hire a special master to draw those particular districts. So there does seem like there is some latitude for the court, but traditionally, yes, the state legislature kind of gets another crack at drawing maps if they are overturned.
Great. Another question was, this seems to be a very political process. Is there anything we can say about the party affiliation of the judges or the panels that considered the litigation cases? What do we know? What can we say?
I mean, I think that you could go back and look up what the party registration of particular judges is. As you may know, judicial elections in North Carolina used to be nonpartisan. When Republicans came into power in 2010, they rather quickly changed judicial elections to being partisan elections. There are a lot of reasons why they might have chosen to do that. And so now it is public knowledge what party those judges are registered, what party they ran as, and so you can look that up. That's sort of a known quantity. I don't know if it's fair to make any particular assumptions about or statements about what that means for how they're going to rule in the cases, but it is public record as to like what party they've actually identified with and run under. Great.
How strong is this litigation case?
I don't know if we can.
Hard question to answer.
Yeah, I don't know if we can answer the question. What I will say is it is sort of, I think in a lot of ways, probably very similar to the case we saw in 2019 in the terms of the kinds of arguments it's making. It's really, I think, we saw in 2019 a case where judges came back and said, extreme partisan gerrymandering is contrary to the state constitution, it's contrary to these provisions of the state constitution. And so the arguments in this time around are very similar. They're relying on the same kind of argument about partisan gerrymandering just not being constitutional.
And I will also say one thing I learned last week with the hearings that happened in the courts was that they are broadcast. So I don't know if that will continue to be the case, like maybe if you know, but
yeah, it's kind of interesting because of COVID. They've really made a lot more things are now being broadcast and sort of live streamed that were not done in the past. And so all of the hearings that we saw last week were live streamed on WebEx, and we can we can try to share that with you when we do get those links. They generally put that information in sort of the actual scheduling documents that the court gives out, and so people can watch them live if they want to. I don't know if that applies to if things go to the state Supreme Court. Like, I don't really know what their situation is, but it seems like things that come in front of that Superior Court judge panel will probably continue to be live streamed through WebEx. If you ever use, I don't know about everywhere, but I know that like Raleigh City Council also uses WebEx. A lot of city government and state government things use WebEx if you've never used that software, but it's not, I don't think it's great to use, but it's very widely freely available.
Yeah, and we will, if we get information about that. We were kind of I didn't realize that it was a thing last week, but if we do get that going forward, we will, and we're allowed to share it, we'll share it out.
Yeah,
because
I think that information should be public if there is a WebEx, generally.
Yeah, and it was really interesting. I'll say for me, I haven't watched a lot of redistricting litigation in the past, or any litigation, and it was really interesting to just hear the arguments that the attorneys were making and the kinds of questions that the judges were asking. It was really interesting. So if you are able to tune in, I'd encourage you to do that. There's a couple more questions. I'm going to skip one because it cues us up really nicely for our next one, but so I'll go to the last one first. If the trial court rules to keep the parent maps, so if the trial court rules to keep the parent maps, or if the state ledge draw up another map, which is still misrepresents the voting districts, can a further lawsuit be filed or appealed to a higher court?
There's definitely room for appeals. And in fact, that actual kind of order that came down from the state Supreme Court said that any appeal of whatever comes out of the trial court needs to be filed within 2 business days after that ruling comes out. So clearly, like, they are anticipating there being some appeals filed to the Supreme Court, probably.
Either way.
Yeah. So yeah, there's room for that case to be appealed by either party, depending on what the outcome is.
So there will be a trial. There will need to be a ruling on the trial, and the written ruling will have to be entered by January 11th. And then they've laid out a timeline, deadlines for when there needs to be an appeal by, so that they can expedite the entire process.
Yeah.
Accurate. Okay. So thank you, Linda, for this question. Your check's in the mail for queuing us up for the next piece. Is there any step we can take as voters, or do we just wait for the judge's rulings? I mean, Leica, do you want to answer that?
Yeah, I mean, one thing that I think that is really important is to continue to keep this issue in the public consciousness, to continue to keep it in the media, and continue to inform people about it. I think there are a lot of different aspects to that. First of all, public atmosphere and public attention can be really important in cases like this. Also, there's sort of a larger factor of just, people in general need to be informed. These maps have come out, but most people in the state probably still don't know what the maps are, what they mean for them, and regardless of the outcome of any cases, we do have an election coming next fall. That's going to happen. We don't know if it's going to happen with these maps or with other maps, but we do know that redistricting should be an important issue in that election. And so, sort of all the different ways that we can raise consciousness about what the maps are, what the problems with them are, how they actually affect people, can play a role both, in sort of making sure that the public environment around this case is super engaged, super in favor of the courts doing, taking strong action against unfair maps, and also, thinking further down the line about this being an important issue in our fall elections.
Great. And one last question, will Mark Elias and Eric Holder participate?
Mark Elias's firm is involved in one of the suits. I'm sure he'll tweet about it a ton. That seems to be his primary mode of engagement. But yeah, his Elias Law Group is involved in one of the cases. Other than that, Eric Holder, we are hopefully going to see more of former AG Holder in North Carolina. Bree and I are working on that at the moment, and we will keep you updated.
All right, great. There are a couple other questions, and I will just kind of try to briefly answer them as we move on to the next, because they're kind of related to what we're going to be doing next. One is, do we have a specific kit that visually shows the negative maps and has a few versions of better ones, so people can coalesce around a good, fair version? I guess, I mean, Lika, do you want to answer that? We're not going to put out we're not going to put out a map like our preferred map. We just want people's voices to be heard, and but do you want to have anything you want to say about that?
Yeah, I think I would just say that this is sort of a moment where, because these lawsuits are happening, the focus is really on the ways in which these maps do not serve the people of the state. That's sort of the priority, is to focus on how they are harming communities in our state, how they're harming your community, more than talking about what a better map would be. I think, our approach to what a better map would be is always, again, going to be coming to you. And so, for instance, if there happens to be a court-ordered redraw process or something like that, we will engage with it very similarly to how we engaged with the process this fall, in terms of making sure there's lots of really good testimony about what people want to see in the maps. But right now, because we're in a situation where we're watching these maps get judicial scrutiny, we really want a lot of the public narrative to focus on how the maps are bad, more than anything else, if that makes sense.
And to that end, we'll go on to the next piece of this, because it really is, I mean, I think what we're getting at in these questions, there's another question about, does All on the Line plan to develop messaging so that folks can help get the messaging out? And I would say that when appropriate, we will do our best to provide, content and messaging. But what we also really need is for folks, everyone on this call, to look at the maps and help us understand how their community is going to be impacted, or how they're personally being impacted. Because, we know, we can look at the maps and see, what makes sense to us from sort of a data perspective. But what's really helpful, and what tends to, I think, resonate with people, especially the folks that we need to be paying attention to this, which are the people who aren't. I mean, we need y'all to be paying attention too, but we need to be getting this message out broader. So I'm gonna, and folks, there's great stuff in the chat. Keep putting stuff in the chat. We are going to move on now to kind of this, what we're calling a storytelling training. It's really, I think, we hope that this will develop into a longer storytelling training that we might be able to do a couple of times, depending on, what the process looks like. But this is just the sort of phase one, which is helping people to look at the maps and start to really unpack what the maps mean for them locally and more broadly as well, but really looking at the maps themselves. Because that's where I think someone made the point in the chat, people get hung up on, I don't like this, but I don't really know what to say about it. And so, that's something that we want to help you with. And one of the ways that we can help you is for you to look at the maps, and then for us to have conversations about, does this map make sense? What do you think's going on here? Are there things that are happening that shouldn't be? Are there, lines that are dividing communities, or, what do you think is going on? So, yes, is there a place to see the computer generated maps that were recommended? I don't know about that. If folks want to answer that in the chat, that's fine. I think that people are talking about the court filings. What we would like to do now is and we think that this is really important, both from a narrative building and messaging standpoint, and also for, all on the line to help us understand so that we can build effective advocacy and messaging and all of that, is to look at the maps with y'all. We're going to share some links where you can get in and look at the maps at the precinct level and see a lot of the data that is in Dave's redistricting, so that you can start just figuring out what you think about the maps. Number one, where you live, which district you're in now. I know probably a lot of folks don't even know which of the new, of the new districts they're in. So we're going to help you figure that out, and then look at the maps together. And we have a tool, it's a Google form that you can use to kind of work through, well, what do I think about these maps? What do they look like to me? What do they mean? And that will help you to start building your kind of personal story that will help you to communicate through letters to the editor or social media posts, or, if you're a member of a group, like a civic group or a party group or a church group, and you can have conversations with people and just talk about, what the maps are doing, and start just having conversations, one-on-one or on social media, or out more broadly in the community. It's really important. We're like I mentioned, I think we're just in a moment right now where people are paying attention to this. And for folks who care about fair maps and fair redistricting and democracy, good democracy, we want to capitalize on this moment as an opportunity to bring more people into this conversation, to educate more people about what's happening and what their stake is in it. And then we do want to be making the case for fair maps in sort of the court of public opinion. The folks who drew these maps are going to be out there with messaging saying that, any judge that rules against them is an activist judge, and they're going to be having messaging, to try to push their view that they should have unchecked power. And we need people to be able to contribute to the narrative that actually the people deserve representation and deserve power. And so in order to do that, we have to understand what the maps are doing. And then also, kind of just to echo what Lake said earlier, there is an election coming up. If this fight over the maps is about who gets a say in our representation, and we want candidates who support fair districting processes, and we want people who support democracy. So we want to make sure that we are informing voters, building energy around the importance of this as an issue, and we can do this. We're in a moment where we can do that now. So appreciate folks being willing to wade into this. And I think it'll be fun once you start getting into the maps and actually thinking about, your personal kind of narrative that you can build around the maps. But it is some work. And we're actually I think I'll go ahead and say, we are gonna have sort of a follow-up. We're gonna get into the maps right now and just sort of share some tools, and then let y'all go away, and hopefully you'll have you can find some time to spend kind of thinking about each of the 3 districts that you're in, that we're talking about: the congressional district, the state house district, and the state senate district. And then we'll have another event next week, and we'll record that. And that's where you can actually start sort of like working on some tactics, like letters to the editor or social media posts, or making graphics that start to kind of communicate what's happening here with a larger audience. So let's see. The first thing that we're going to do, I'm going to actually stop sharing my screen for a moment so that we can, oh, there's the poll. It was hiding behind my screen. I'm going to pull up. Lika, will you drop the Carolina Forward link in the chat? So if folks want to follow along, I would encourage you to do that because this is going to be, you know, you're going to want to be a little hands-on with this. You can also just follow along, and we'll include these links in a follow-up email as well. Let me share my screen again. Okay, so the link that we're dropping is from an organization called Carolina Forward. We're just using this because they very awesomely uploaded these maps into Dave's redistricting and linked them on this website, so you can go and find them easily whenever you want to. And I'm gonna, as an example to walk through, I'm gonna look at the state house plan because I'm just gonna share sort of how you can look at these using my state house. Because when I looked at it, I was like, whoa, that sucks. So, okay, so you click on the map you want to look at, and this is what's going to pull up. I think that this is what you'll see. It's possible, and folks can maybe, if you want to put in the chat, if you're having a different experience, because I did make an account with Dave's. You may have to start an account, but I think you only have to do that if you want to edit a map, which we're not necessarily doing here. So just to kind of orient you to what you're looking at. So this is the map, the newly passed, the newly enacted North Carolina House map. On the left over here, you have a district selector. So you can click on this little, over here, you can click on each district, and that's how it's going to tell you a little bit about the district up here on the left. And then you can change the colors, you can change the opacity of the map. I'm going to make it a little lighter so that you can see the underlying maps. And then you can click on or off of the overlays here. I like seeing the background map because I think that makes it easier for me to figure out what's going on, because I am used to looking at, you know, a Google map, which is another thing you can do is pull up a Google map and it might help. So I'm going to zoom in here. You can also click on the plus or minus to zoom in, depending on your computer. And like, it looks like there's a couple people in the waiting room if you want to let them in. And then over here on the right, you see precinct details. This is pretty interesting. If you just roll over with your cursor a precinct, so the precincts are outlined in kind of this like red, each of these, and the precinct lines you can turn on and off as well. So that's turning them off, but I'm going to leave them on. And when you roll over, when you just roll over a precinct over here on the right-hand column, it's going to, first of all, tell you the name of the precinct at the top, and then it's going to give you the population. It's going to break the population of the precinct down by demographic information, by race, and then also the voting age population. And down at the bottom here is the composite votes. I actually don't know what exactly data they're using for the composite votes, but it's some kind of tally of probably statewide vote share from 2016 and 2020 to kind of give you a sense of, okay, this precinct here votes pretty Democratic, but pretty Republican, what those look like. So like I said, I was somewhat surprised when I looked at this map because not that I shouldn't have been, but so I think my precinct is right here. And when I made my community of interest map earlier in the year, I talked about how my community is actually what I consider the area where the families send their kids to the same our community school, right? And that crosses this road right here. This is a a little bit of a highway that kind of runs from downtown towards Chapel Hill. And, so my neighborhood is actually like here and then across the street as well. And it's split in half. So that's a noticing that I took from this map, is my neighborhood is split in half in this map in a way that doesn't make sense to me. There's not a real reason for it. And, I don't like it. It doesn't serve my needs. So you can just kind of, look at the map, zoom in, figure out. So I figured out that I am currently districted into House District 29, make a note of that. It's going to be good to know. And then just sort of look around and see what you can notice about how the districts are drawn, what looks like it's happening, ask yourself some questions. I mean, to me, it looks pretty clear that they've tried to include as much of the actual city of Durham into these 3 districts, and then they've combined the more rural parts of Durham, which are still not very, some of it's pretty rural, but some of it's not. And they've combined that with this Person County is what's happening here. I also wanted to just sort of point out I'm going to use another example from a different area of the state. But I think it's relevant, probably relevant for a lot of folks. And you can just see when you are in these different areas, get in there and look around and just like see what's going on, and just jot down some notes, like what's happening, what looks odd, what questions does it raise for you about what's going on there. Let's see, I wanted to show you, I was talking to a friend in Cabarrus County, and noticed that over here, one of the things that the legislature made a big deal about was how few municipalities they split. And it's funny because, they made a big deal about that in the congressional and the Senate maps, but then it seems like in the House maps, they weren't so concerned about it. But I noticed that, you can, if you turn on these blue lines, these are actually the municipal boundary lines. And over here, you can click on the box to turn them on and off. So you can see the city of Concord is in this area. And then city of Kannapolis, things, the parts that are considered that are actually part of the municipality are here. And what you'll notice about Concord is it's in 3 different districts. It's split into 3 different districts. And then there's several precincts out here that are not part of the city, but that are included in the same district. So you can do some investigation and look at, why do we think that that's happening? If you live in this area, does that make sense? Why or why not? And that's the kind of information that we want to be looking at and investigating. And even if all you do is come up with a list of questions of like, this seems interesting, this seems weird, I'd like to know more about this, that kind of data, that kind of information we're really interested in. And it's really helpful for you to kind of build the narrative, build your story around, what is redistricting, what's happening with the districting that happened, what's happening with these maps, and who does it serve. Leika, what am I forgetting?
I think that's everything. I think you talked about how, the other thing that I wanted to make clear is, so if you go to the district selector on the left side, you have to actually choose your district to get the demographic and other information about the district. So on the left side, if you choose the district in that selector, you can see under district details, it'll show you some demographic information, etc. On the right side is always going to be your precinct details for any precinct that you are kind of like rolling over with your mouse. That's the only thing I want to be clear about. So anything you're seeing on the left side is related to the district you've selected. So earlier, Bree and I were looking at this and I was like, those district numbers look really weird. Well, we had actually left it on a different district than the one we were currently looking at. So you have to actively select it to get the information about that particular district. I think that's the main thing that I wanted to make sure.
Great point. Yeah. And it is really interesting to kind of like scroll around and see, the different makeups of various precincts where you live. You know, it's just kind of interesting. And then
I
think
think
about,
John has his hand raised.
yeah, John.
Question.
Yeah, a quick question. When you put your district up there, at the bottom it has the composite and it shows the votes Democrat, votes Republican. I just wanted to make clear I understood that. That is how the votes were cast. Those aren't, so for example, someone who's unaffiliated is included in that total. So the Democratic total is Democrats plus some number of affiliates produce that final count in the vote.
Yeah, so it's not about how voters are registered there. It's election. It's some kind of composite of election outcomes.
I got you.
Not about voter registration.
Gotcha.
Which is a really important point, because like we always talk about how we're an evenly divided state between, you know, roughly evenly between registered Republicans, Democrats, and unaffiliated. But that doesn't mean that, you know, unaffiliated voters are like, you know, switching votes every election. How the precincts voted in previous elections is pretty interesting to look at. And that's exactly what that's telling you, is how the votes were actually cast.
Okay, thanks.
And Rebecca is asking about whether it's important to look at school districts. I think that that's super interesting. I'm not sure if that data is available on Dave's or not. Someone else might know. I'm not sure because I have not looked it up. But if it is there, I'm sure it's interesting to look at for sure.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that either. You can see it in representable, I think. I know it's not really fun to like toggle to different tools, but it's also probably available somewhere in your local if you want to look at a specific place. Like I know where my school district is, but you could look at, I'm sure you could find that, but it doesn't look like it's available, at least in this particular map, as far as I can see. Mm-hmm. John, did you raise your hand again? Did you have another?
Sorry, one more quick question. It looks like you can create a custom overlay. So I was reminded of this by the school district, but I don't know what kind of file or where I would find the necessary file to create a custom overlay that had the school district in it or some other kind of thing I wanted to look at. Does anybody know about how to create a custom overlay in Dave's?
Rebecca's saying that if someone who basically, it sounds like if you had the shape files for those districts, you could upload them in Dave's. I don't know enough about how the system works, honestly, or where you would find shape files for school districts, but it sounds possible. So if anyone has the hookup, let us know.
So it sounds like you got to go find a shape file for whatever you want to overlay.
Yeah, and we don't want to get too technical. I mean, the idea for this is to give folks tools to understand what's happening in the map so that you can talk about it. So you can figure out kind of what your, you know, if you were going to write a letter to the editor, how would you talk about how your area was impacted? And there's 3 different maps. So what we are encouraging folks to do and asking folks to do is take a look at each of the maps, and see if you can, what you notice about each map. So take a few minutes to look at the state Senate map, at the state House map, and at the congressional map, and spend some time looking in the map. And then I got to stop sharing, and then I got to get back to my, do you want to see if there's any questions or anything in the chat, like, while I go back and find my,
I don't see, okay, for the state house maps, is there a way to easily see what changed in my or any other district with the new maps compared to what's been in place for the last elections? I mean, I assume also that you could probably do an overlay similar to what we were talking about with the school board maps. That way, there are, I know, shape files available for previous map versions on the state legislative website. If you don't want to go into that level of complication, I do believe that the Find Your Legislators feature on the state legislative website still has the previous maps. And so that's one way that you could kind of like look over there and compare. You know, if you're not feeling up to sort of uploading your own overlay there.
Great. And I'm going to share my screen again. And we're going to just kind of finish going through the questions that we would ask and that we're hoping that y'all will think through as you kind of work through understanding what the maps mean for you, and then thinking about how you can help kind of build the narrative around, you know, why we need fair maps and what's wrong with these maps and how they impact your community. So when you're in in each of those in Dave's, looking through them, we encourage you to do, and Lika, do you want to go ahead and drop the form into the chat? Actually, I need to put this in. Do you have that?
Yep.
Okay. So spend a few minutes in each map and just write down what you notice about the map. How it does, you don't have to, you know, this first step isn't about like, you know, you don't have to necessarily know like what it means or, you know, anything like that, but just sort of take notice of what's happening. How is your community represented? Is your neighborhood divided? Like, you know, my neighborhood was divided into, it looks like, you know, they've grouped the rural parts of my county in with another county, even though, you know, I think that Durham as a whole is, you know, it would make more sense to have Durham, you know, maybe divided in a different way. So is your community kept whole? Is it divided or connected with areas that have totally different interests? And what can you say about that? And just think, you know, answer those questions if you can. We have, you know, there's a form, and stuff might come to mind for some maps and not others, or some areas and not others. Don't worry if you can't, you know, if you can't answer every question. Just answer the ones that you do notice something about, or you can say something about the map, or you think there's something going on that you want to lift up. If you do use that form, we'll get a copy, which will be helpful to us, and we may want to follow up with you to talk through some of what you're seeing. And you will also get emailed a copy so that you can use that if you do want to do any additional, like a letter to the editor, or any other kind of, you know, informing of people in your community about, you know, what's going on with the maps.
Yeah. And one thing I want to say, just that Bree has already said, but just to emphasize, we are going through this with you so you can look at the maps and sort of start to draw some conclusions and have some notes. Like Bree said, next week we are going to actually be having another training where we're going to tell you what to do with that. Once you've looked at the map, once you have those observations, what are some different things you can do with it, letters to the editor, social media posts, what your options are for using that information. And then I think, like someone else also mentioned in the chat, we are very happy to work with people one-on-one to help them pull that stuff together. You know, if you're looking at the map and you're having a hard time figuring out what to say about it or how to organize your thoughts, we're happy to help you with that. You know, like we're here to kind of help you however much you need along those lines, and to turn this into whatever makes sense to you. And we also, you know, honestly, for our own purposes of making sure these kinds of stories get out, we may contact you and say, looks like you have the basis of a really good story. You know, you know, would you be up for this being on our social media? Would you be up for turning this into an LTE? We'll talk you through it.
Yeah, this is about, you know, sourcing the stories, and the only way to do that is if folks like you are willing to like take a look and give us that community eye view, the grassroots view, because like we said, you know, we don't know the whole state like y'all do. We don't know where you live like you do. So it's really helpful if you, and don't let perfect be the enemy of good, especially with this form. Any information you want to put in there is great. I think it'll help you if you are going to take the next step, and it'll definitely help us understand kind of what folks are seeing in their local maps. And also, I think I set that form so that you can go back and edit. So if you want to if you do a little bit of it and you want to go back and do something else later, I think you can go back and to the same form, where you can just fill out additional forms. Is totally fine. Or it's really a resource for y'all to use to help to try to, get to this, being able to help build the narrative around what's actually going on with the maps. So then the last sort of phase of that, as you're looking at the maps and just writing down your noticings, then you also want to think about well, what is my community and what are the cultural and geographic features that make up my neighborhood or my community. It might be helpful to think about the things that specifically relate to your representation. Like I've said before, for me, one of my big issues is public education. My kids are in public school. I have a lot of, that's kind of where I do a lot of organizing. That's an issue that's really important to me. So I definitely want my school district to be to have the same representative. That makes sense to me. So things like that. And also just, who lives, if I talk about Durham, I think about, the interest that Durham has generally and how those differ from other parts of the state. And that's not, good or bad. It's just what people in Durham are facing might be different from what folks in, Alamance County are facing. So then if you can think through, or if things come to mind, what are the impacts of these maps? What will the impacts of these maps be on your community or your interests? And, that can be a lot of different things, but just write down whatever comes to mind, and we will be happy to follow up, or if you are able to come to our next phase of this, and we'll probably do more than one to help you kind of turn this data into actual story, a product, and well, let's look, a tactic. Letters to the editor, or op-eds. I know there's folks on this call who are planning to write op-eds, and we're totally down to help with that. I think it's really important that we're getting those op-eds and those LTEs into newspapers over the next month. Also, creating shareable content on social media, especially stuff that actually is surprising or might be of interest to other people who live where you live. One of the things I think we'll try to do on Tuesday is give you some resources to make easy, quick kind of graphics that you can use to post, that if you want to post on social media to grab attention. You can also make videos. Leica is a meme expert, not surprising. So we'll go over stuff like that, but it's really just thinking about what you can personally do to help kind of, get the story out. And we also, I think that this will be helpful. This exercise of looking at the maps and thinking about how they affect you personally will be really helpful. If there is an opportunity to provide input in the event of a map redraw, you will be ready to go. You will have a good portion of the work kind of done, and you'll be ready for that. Also, you may, as you think about this and look at this, you may come up with something that might make a good pitch for local media. Journalists are covering redistricting right now. They're always looking for relevant stories. So if you see something and you want to think about talking to local media, we're happy to help you, think that through, come up with a pitch, that sort of thing.
And again, also having this information is helpful for us. So, we definitely during the research process had a lot of journalists saying, do you have volunteers who are from particular areas? It may have been a local paper in that area. They wanted to talk to someone from their area who had a good story. And, we tried to make those connections. And so that's not going to end now. I mean, in fact, it may even escalate because these cases are going to bring so much more attention. And so, sort of knowing that there are people that we can say, this person has a good story that they've thought about. Let's hook you up with this local journalist and make sure that there's a compelling story about this in your local paper.
Yeah, great. And finally, I think I saw some folks on this call who I know have local newsletters, who are members of, local activist or civic groups, or if you're part of a church group, or, you want to share information with your local party. This is a good time to do that. And this is an issue that I don't know if other folks feel like this, but I feel like I spend so much time thinking about this that sometimes I have to take a step back and be like, oh, like normal people aren't sitting around like obsessing over maps. So there's probably a lot of, of information that folks would want to have that would be relevant that you have that you could share. And if you can think about, who would be interested and who you can share that information with. And again, we're very happy to help you if you're going to do something like that, to prepare a presentation or think through what you want to talk about and how you want to present it. And Suzanne, I see your hand.
Yeah, and I put it in the chat, but I just wanted to point out that this approach worked really well when we had to defend the Affordable Care Act. And the reason it worked is because there were national archives. New York Times had one, for instance, but they made it really easy for people to upload their little stories. And then anybody who was interested could go in and see the diversity of stories and how many there were. And so as you're doing this, will you have an AOTL North Carolina archive that will be made available to every journalist, everybody who could help us get this word out?
God, I hope so.
Yeah, I don't think that we had specifically thought about that. I mean, we had sort of been thinking about this Google form as sort of the start of our own internal sort of database, but I would love for us to have a website like that.
Yeah, I think that's a genius idea, and super important too. Again, just for I just think there's probably a fair amount of work to go from like going into the maps and then working with folks to actually like figure out what that narrative is about, like connecting the issues that they care about to the maps and how do you actually make it salient for folks. But I think that is a brilliant idea and definitely something that I would like to work towards.
Can I just ask my second question?
Yeah.
So I've been working in Union County and our interests are really super local. So they're sub-state level because we've got a horrible situation with the Board of Education and the county commissioners. And so we'll be looking at that level. Can we give you our comments on that too, even though it's below state level?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's, it's sort of like our organization doesn't really, unfortunately, probably have the bandwidth to work on a lot of local redistricting stuff. We are very interested in it, but there are a lot of North Carolina state-based organizations that are working very hard on local redistricting. And so, I mean, at least if we have those stories, we can at least hold on to them for you. We can connect you to organizations that are doing that sort of local redistricting work. And it will be, we will keep that information safe and have it available if that, and try to make those connections where we can, even if we aren't doing that work ourselves.
Yeah, and we have done that. And yeah, Suzanne, I would definitely say, connect folks with us and we'll figure out who is the right person to connect them with. And actually this question kind of, I think, transitions really well into our next piece. I'm just looking to see if I missed anything.
Angela is asking about making a video about sort of how to, turning this into maybe this part of the training into an educational video. And I think that you and I talked about that a little bit today.
We did, yeah. I see your the 4 points that you're writing, and I would love for you to, if you keep writing those, because one of the challenging things about this is it's like, it's different, like every map in every area, it might be a little bit different. So it's really hard to come up with something that's like, does it do X, Y, or Z?
Yeah. I mean, just to say, we've seen a really kind of a diversity of tactics in some ways. For instance, in large urban areas, we tend to see those communities being packed a lot. And then in sort of smaller mid-sized cities, we tend to see those places being cracked apart. And so there's not really a one-size-fits-all answer for how every area is being treated by these maps. It really depends on where you live. For instance, I think someone mentioned Union County, but like Monroe and Union County is being split up into a bunch of different districts. However, if you go to a larger city, the real issue tends to be packing. So, but I do feel like we're really reliant on people like you, Angela, who can tell us like what's the most helpful video that we could make. Like we would love to make a video. Bree and I sit around and do this stuff all day. We kind of like start lacking perspective on what's relevant to people and what's actually helpful. We try to do our best. But you know, Bree, maybe you could put your email in the chat and Angela could share that with you, because I think that we would love to do a video like that. If you can give us sort of like what you think is going to be most relevant.
Yeah, that's a great, I'm putting my email in the chat and also inviting, true of anyone, if you have feedback on what would be helpful, that is the most helpful thing for us is, you know, if you tell us what we can do that will make it easier for you to do anything related to this, like we will do our absolute utmost to provide you with whatever's helpful. So please email us. And if, Angela, if you wouldn't mind putting that in an email, that would be super helpful. Like what exactly would be helpful? That would be really helpful. And we are going to, we were thinking that we would try to put together some kind of a YouTube video, and what I'm hearing is we need to keep it as simple as possible, simple and straightforward as possible, which is always a challenge, but we'll do our best.
Definitely not my strong suit.
Yeah. Okay, so I think this also, you know, Suzanne's question about the local redistricting and kind of segues nicely into this. Leica, do you want to just sort of talk a bit about like where we are?
So some of you might know, even before Bree came on, we had a Fight for Fair Map Summit this past year in January for 2021 to kind of get everyone psyched up. We had a lot of people from local organizations talking about different topics, why redistricting was important. We had someone come talk about the census in North Carolina. We had people talk about the history of, you know, redistricting reform efforts in North Carolina, what makes a good public comment. We had a lot of different experts come and talk about a lot of different things. And it did really well. It was very popular. We had really great attendance. Eric Holder was also there, which I think people really enjoyed as well. People got to ask him some questions. And so we want to do that again this coming year. So we are now in the phase where we're trying to decide on topics. We believe that this event will be on a weekend in February. Obviously, everything that's going on with the litigation means that things are going to be a lot more busy over the next couple of months than we were anticipating. But we are still at this point planning it for February weekend. And we are starting to just try to figure out what content sounds good, makes sense to us. So we here put together a list of some of the content that we have been thinking about having there, some of the panels or discussions or interviews. And we would love to hear your feedback. Do these sound like things that you want to hear about? Are there things that are missing that you would really like to hear about? And I'll just walk through. Obviously, people are going to want a litigation update. We will try to do some form of that. How gerrymandering contributes to extremism. That's something that we thought there's some interest in. We do want to do a spotlight on local redistricting and issues in local redistricting. I know we've heard a lot about cases where local redistricting specifically is being used to reduce the impact of Black votes. And so we want to, you know, try to put a spotlight on that and some of the groups that are working on that issue. Redistricting commissions, you know, this past year, we've seen a lot of redistricting commissions go through this process in other states. We want to hear from advocates in those states about what working with those commissions was like, what were the good things, what were the downfalls, you know, sort of give us some perspective, because obviously in North Carolina, we would very much like for our legislators not to be doing this. And so what can we learn from how commissions operate in other states? We were thinking about a session on what North Carolina voters really want. So public opinion polling, what are North Carolina voters' stances on the issues? What do they actually want to see? And how does that differ from what we're actually getting from our gerrymandered legislature? And then we would really, I reached out to them today, so let's cross our fingers and hope that they get back to me. I would really, really love for us to hear from the guys who wrote the Vote Collectors book about the McCrae Dallas election fraud in Bladen County. I think that would be fascinating. I think a lot of you probably hopefully would think that would be fascinating. So we'll see. But anything, if there's anything on here that you think is not as interesting, or if there's something here that's missing that you would like to see, we would really love to hear from you about, we want to make this conference something that is appealing to you, educational, has stuff on topics that you actually find interesting.
Does anyone when you're looking at this list, is there anything that makes you excited, or you're like, no, that sounds terrible? Feel free to put in the chat or unmute if you have. I would love to just hear feedback if anyone has any ideas about that. Anything that's.
Oh, yeah. I mean, when Marilyn says anything how to use the information and take action, I know we are thinking about doing a storytelling training session similar to probably combining elements of the stuff we're doing today and going to do next week as part of it, because I think that's going to be something we're going to have emphasis on.
Helen, you are the intended audience. People, our volunteers, activists, people who care about redistricting or are interested in learning more.
Yeah. So this is for you all who are, the people who are here who are the established volunteers with us who we've spent lots of time with over the past year, but also anyone who's sort of new to volunteering on redistricting issues. But just in general, volunteers are sort of the intended audience for this.
And if you have, if there's something that you're curious about or something that would be helpful, feel free to email me and just give me your ideas, and we'll do our best to accommodate. Like, you are the intended audience, and we want this to be relevant for you all. Speaker from Mobilize Us with success stories. That's a great idea. Yeah. Great. Thank you all feel free to keep putting stuff in the chat. Yes, I think, did I not put that on this list? Jack said it would be good to have a topic covering independent redistricting commissions. That didn't make this list, but it is on our list. I just ran out of room on the slide. No,
it's on here.
It's on here?
Yeah.
Good. Yeah. We were talking about having some folks who worked on redistricting commissions and could speak to, what went well, what were some of the pitfalls. If we are going to be pushing for that in North Carolina, what should we be considering? And Pat, can you say more about a letter writing campaign? Whoops. Holding the map makers accountable.
All right. Well, we've done so many, I've done thousands of letters and postcards. Can we write to the powers that be, that maybe the judges or whatever, and do a major campaign?
Well, we were talking about that in the last one, and part of why we want, we wanted to dig into the maps and personal sort of your understanding our personal stake and personal narratives around this is so that, we can do some of that. I don't know, Leica, what do you think about, and I would say that like writing to lobbying judges is kind of a no-no.
Yeah, I'd say that's not really, it's not looked on positively, I guess I would say. I don't know if that would be helpful. I think that at this point, it's probably more about, things like letters to the editor, or if we're in a court redraw situation, then probably going after legislators again. But one thing I will say is that Bree and I have been talking about doing postcarding to voters about districts, probably, I would assume sometime after the point at which we know what the maps are going to be. That's one thing that we do want to do, is put together postcards for that.
Writing to voters and letting them know, which district they're in, and we're not sure what the messaging will be, but do think that that's a good idea. And also Suzanne said, holding map makers accountable in upcoming elections, certainly, holding politicians accountable, and perhaps also our judges are elected. So absolutely, letting voters know who they're voting for and what they've done, I think is.
Yeah, I definitely seen a lot of people talking about the fact that we do have judicial elections in North Carolina. There will be, I think state Supreme Court, there's at least one state Supreme Court seat that's going to be up for election, maybe more than that this fall. So obviously judicial elections are important.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think John's kind of put a similar thought in the chat. I do think, depending on where you are, there is still a lot of utility to shaping the narrative around, the court cases and the maps themselves and why this matters. I don't think that is something that we should ignore. But I also totally understand the urge to pivot to holding people accountable who are in power. And I think
I think that obviously we have, if me from a couple of years ago, we have done electoral work in the past. We will be doing electoral work this fall. We do think electoral work is really important. We do feel like that this is still a point in time in which focusing on the maps and what's happening with them and the impact is still very critical considering everything that's going on. But we will be doing electoral work with you all, come fall of 2022.
Let's see here. So just as we, I actually can't even see the time. We're past time. I apologize. I wanted to leave y'all with some next steps and reminders, and then we're happy to hang out for another couple minutes if folks are still putting questions or comments in the chat. If you are, Leica, would you mind dropping the narrative form again? If you're able to fill out that form, give us any information, anything that comes to mind. It's really helpful for us, and I think will be helpful for you in terms of helping to shape the narrative in the next month or two. So if you could fill out that form, that would be really helpful. We are planning sort of a letter to the editor narrative building workshop where we'll actually start doing some of the tactics. So we'll talk about letters to the editor and other tactics. We're experimenting with doing it in the middle of the day. Next Tuesday at noon at lunch hour. And we will, I think that was in the notes, Leica, if you want to drop the Mobilize link, and it'll also come out, it'll be in the email. And then we've gone ahead and planned our January statewide meeting for, what did we say? What is written on there?
The 13th, knowing that we are supposed to get some kind of ruling from the trial court by the 11th. So there will be plenty to talk about, hopefully.
Yes. So that's what's coming up. And of course, if you have ideas that you'd like to see for the summit that you haven't already shared, we'd love to hear. Okay, let's see. I think I saw some comments. In the next meeting, could you please include a summary of all the counties where redistricting is shifting and changing political majorities? Yeah, we will. That's a great idea. Thank you for lifting that up, Dilsey. And yeah, we'll take a look at that. We'll take a look at that. And if you have, if folks have other things that you'd like to see that would be helpful in the next meeting, please don't hesitate to let us know, and we will do our best.
And Marilyn, we'll definitely be recording that training and sending it to people. So no worries about that.
All right. Thank you all so much for being here and for all your work. This fight is not over. We got some good news this week. Enjoy that. There's gonna be stuff happening. And we'll keep you posted as usual.
All right.
See you next week.
Have the rest of your evening, everyone. Hopefully we'll see some of you on Tuesday.
Bye.
Thank you all.
Bye.
Bye.